Recently, I had the honor and privilege of interviewing former made member of the Colombo crime family, Larry Mazza. Larry Mazza did 12 years in prison for murder, and he is now out and doing well. He has written a book, and the book entails everything that you could possibly imagine of the underworld in Brooklyn during the 80s and 90s. Here it is, the book called The Life by Larry Mazza. It is worth the read. If you like true crime, and you like organized crime, and you like crime about power, this is worth it. So the way you can buy this book, it is www.larrymazza-thelife.com. And believe me, this is a fascinating read. He has lived through one of the most vicious, bloody, ruthless wars in Mafia history during the 1990s. Once again, www.larrymazza-thelife.com. Buy it. It's worth the read. It's a fantastic read. Now, here's my interview with Larry Mazza. All right, today on Serious and Silliness, we have former made member of the Colombo crime family, Larry Mazza. What's up, Larry? How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be on your show, an old Bensonhurst friend. So thanks for
Thank you. And before we get started, I just want to, this is your book. I just started reading it. I just got it a few days ago.
Okay.
And it's The Life by Larry Mazza. And so far, it's pretty good. I've only just started. I'm only a few chapters in, but so far, it's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're going to see a lot of places you recognize, that's for sure.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's the truth. All right. So I've never spoken to you before. So let's start from the beginning. You didn't have the typical gangster childhood, according to your book. You were a good kid. You didn't run with a wild crew of kids in high school or anything like that.
Not at all.
And there was some rough kids in that neighborhood back then.
Well, yeah, Brooklyn, as you know, has definitely, especially back then, a big mixture of different ethnic groups. You had your mob crews, you had your drugs, you had a little of everything, really, depending on where you were in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I grew up in a very normal lifestyle. My father was a fireman, lieutenant in the fire department. My mom had a job. I played ball, every sport you could think of, including kickboxing. And nobody would have expected that I would have wound up in that life.
So why don't you tell us the story about, because how you wound up in the life is really interesting. So why don't you tell us that story?
Well, yeah, it is. It's very unique. And, there's a whole bunch of different parts of this story that all come together in a crazy way. But yeah, I started out, I was working in Danzas, which isn't far from where your family is from, on 18th Avenue and 61st. And one of my jobs was to deliver big orders of groceries to houses, people where they lived. And one of them I delivered to was to, at the time, an older woman to me named Linda. She was about 31, give or take. I was about 18. And one thing led to the other. As I delivered more and more to her, we got closer and wound up having an affair together.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think it was sincere, or do you think she was a little manipulative?
Well, at the very beginning, I thought for sure it was totally sincere. And then the proof would be in the pudding, so to speak. We were together almost 10 years. So really? That's no fling. That's a lot more than a fling. There was a lot of feelings. And sometimes it was peculiar because she would be very jealous, and she was the one that ultimately was married.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I was a kid, So she wanted me all to herself. So there was definitely strong feelings, and I felt the same way back.
Mm-hmm. Now, her husband was a Colombo family captain with a notorious background, notorious reputation.
Yes.
And his name was Greg Scarpa, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, he was. And he was actually not officially a captain. He was what's considered a boss's man. Oh. He can go direct to the boss, even though he didn't have that title. Mm-hmm. And as the years go by, there's more and more coming out about why he didn't take the captain spot or why he wasn't offered a captain spot. But that's, all speculative. It could be because down the road it came out that he wound up probably jumping the gun. it came out that he was a longtime informer for the FBI. So that being said, I don't think he was allowed to be in an administrative role. He would have lost that status as an informant and the protection. Protection he had. And plus, it also came out way later on, and again, jumping the gun, that I heard that the boss and his son knew about Greg for 20 years, and he was an informant for 30. So obviously something happened along the way that opened their eyes to him. So there's a lot of things that are starting to come out more and more as people die, as documents get released and things like that. But yeah, he was a boss's man. He went straight to Joe Colombo, direct to Joe Colombo, and he went direct to Junior Percival.
Okay. Now, he had his own crew and he was treated like a boss, correct?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're familiar with the term fiefdom. If you read about the old, way back, in, I don't even know what years, 1500, maybe before,
right,
when there were kings and the kings had serfs and they served for a fief and all, I guess, what is it called? Like the Knights of the Round Table, those days. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he had his own fiefdom. He could do whatever he wanted. Mm. He was in the Colombo family. He had to answer to the boss, but nobody could tell him what to do. Mm. He did hits on his own. When time came, he wanted to get into the drugs. He got into it. There was nothing he couldn't do in his circle. And so he had his own family within the family.
How did he gain such notoriety? How did he gain such respect and dominance?
Well, first of all, he had a run that was ridiculous. I mean, with very little legal problems. That's hard. Normally, you get stumped by the FBI along the way. You got to come back out. You're in and out of jail. Most people.
Right.
Also, going back that far, he survived a lot of wars and bosses, different bosses. This was his third war he was involved in that ultimately, we'll get to, was our demise. So he went on that far. Plus, he was an enormous earner. So whenever you earn that much money, you're kicking in big bucks to the family, they are always going to turn the other cheek or allow you to do things, because it's not that honorable. It's, the bottom line is the dollar. And he was a killing machine, okay? And I think the family knew that he could kill in the most precarious situations. Like there's times you got to set a guy up and it takes a month or two. But Greg would walk into a place, a crowded restaurant, no mask, no disguise, other than maybe a mustache, that he wore once, and he got a famous picture because of that. And they knew it wouldn't bring heat. And again, going in hindsight, if they knew about him, they used him to death. So, and he, with all of that, he was still a no-nonsense guy in the street. If you owed him money, you better pay it. Didn't care who you were, who you talked about was your friend. He'd hurt you in a heartbeat. Okay, and we've done it several times. Guy come in and mention a name. Oh, yeah, but I know Sammy. I know John. I know this guy. They got a beating right there. It didn't matter. Go. And now go get him. If he wants to come and pay you money, he could. And that was his attitude. And he forced us all. Not that he forced us. He educated us all to have the same attitude, or groomed us.
Okay.
Didn't care who you were with. If you owed us money, pay it, or mind your business.
Okay. So why don't you explain how you were introduced to him?
Well, the first time I met him, Linda, well, let me go back a step. I was on the fire department list, very high. I was likely to be a fireman pretty soon. I was in college when we met, John Jay College. And what happened was Linda was part of a company, a legitimate company that Greg was putting together with some other legitimate guys, an accountant, a lawyer, and it was a supply company. So there was going to be a need for a sales manager in the Eastern region where it was starting. And she talked Greg into giving me that position. She said, this kid is a good kid. He's in college. He's got a good family. He's smart. He doesn't do drugs. He doesn't smoke. I mean, I was what you would want for a son, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and she said he's very smart. He's good with numbers. So all this, she says, all right. He said, all right, let me meet him. So now she starts telling me she wants me to meet the husband. And I'm obviously uncomfortable with that because of the relationship. But she was convincing, and eventually I says, okay, I'll meet him. You know, it's a good opportunity for me too. So we go to a restaurant on Fifth Avenue one night, the first time I meet him. But before that, I'm at the house and I'm waiting for him to come. I know I'm going to meet him. I'm a nervous wreck. She had to give me we shouldn't have to, but I took a glass of vodka. I'm about 19. I didn't really drink that much yet.
Now, did you know who he was at this point?
No.
No. And
no, but I was still.
What year was this about?
Oh, let's say 79.
Okay.
Because 78, I met her. I was getting ready to turn 18, and I lied. I told her I was 18, so she didn't do anything wrong about with that legally. I was, she thought I was over 18.
So just to put it in perspective, during the late 70s, early 80s, the Mafia was at an all-time high. In Brooklyn, there was gangsters. All over New York City, there was gangsters everywhere. Mm-hmm. They pretty much ran everything. So this was huge. So go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I knew they were around. I knew about the social clubs. I had an uncle that hung out when he was a dinosaur with the Colombo family. Mm-hmm. He's, you read about him in my book. Mm-hmm. But no, here I am meeting a husband. I don't know who he is, but I'm nervous. I don't think it's really appropriate and whatever. Anyway, he pulls up in a big black Fleetwood Rome caddy, smoked windows, smoked hubcaps or wheels, whatever they were. Gets out of the car at night with dark sunglasses, wearing a sport jacket, really sharp colors, comes swaggering to the door.
Yeah, you were like,
just from the driveway to the door, he walks slow and like, yeah, this is me, So I already knew something was off. He wasn't the salesman I thought he was going to look like, or the doctor, the traveling, whatever. So anyway, he comes up to the door. I stick out my hand. I say, I'm Larry. He says, I'm Greg, in a real deep voice. And the funny thing was, all along, I thought his name was Charlie. He had told me his name was Charles Shiro, and you'll read about that. I'm not going to get into every little detail. We'll be here all night.
All right.
But so anyway, now right off the bat, I'm a little shocked. So he walks inside. He's going to freshen up, whatever. She comes in, and I says, he told me his name's Greg. I thought it was Charlie for the last 6 months. Mm. And she says, oh, he just uses that name. I mean, people just use names. Okay. So anyway, I said, all right, whatever. We go to the restaurant. I meet the partners. Now I'm in this business. So I get the position. I actually tell my mom and dad about it. And my father was a little excited. He didn't know all the details of who was who, but he says, well, it sounds like a good thing. Give it a shot, while I was waiting for the test. But what happens now, the fire department test gets thrown out. And there was a discussion over whether, and that won the federal court, whether it was too tough for women and minorities and things like that. Mm. So it gets put on a 2-year hold, and then the judge rules that there'll be a new test 2 years later. So it was like 4 years. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, I dropped out of college and I took this job. And after about not even a year, because it was about a year and a half in, I started getting into the rackets. The company dissolves. I heard there was a fire in the factory, and I never saw any of the partners again. I would imagine, in hindsight, it might have been a big insurance scam job type of thing where they took a bundle of money in, what Greg did, and that was it. Now I'm in no man's land. So Linda tells me that I think you should get in business. The other businesses with Greg, he'll explain them to you. So I did. I sat with him one day. He opened the door. I started, in the lowest of all the businesses, the lowest level business is a number runner. You just pick up numbers from people in the street, just like this, the lottos in 7-Eleven. You go in and bet a 3-digit number. But we had that or invented that long before the states were doing it. Mm-hmm. And I started taking the number. And what happened was I was pretty good at, making it grow. I would go to different OTBs where I knew gamblers were. Mm-hmm. I would go to different places, different social clubs where I knew guys were gamblers and things like that. So it started growing. And then at the OTBs, I started taking horse action. What I did was I told all the players, I says, OTB takes out 20%. We don't.
Right.
So I was getting action, writing down bets all day long from OTB. And Greg liked that. He saw that I was like good with the numbers. And, you know, ultimately he put me with his son, Greg Jr., to start a sports business, sports gambling business. It took a little time, maybe 6 months.
Okay.
So I wound up growing in the sports business to a very, very big level. By 21, 22 years old, I had one of the biggest businesses in, you know, I won't say the country, but.
Yeah. Now, when you say business, it's not exactly a business, right? I mean, it is, you know,
Well,
for people who, you know, aren't from Bensonhurst.
Yeah. Well, you know, John, I know what you're saying, but it is a business. It has to be run like a business. It's not a legitimate business.
Right.
And it's a racket, but there's hours on the phone.
Right.
There's hours setting the lines. There's hours making bets, taking bets. And then there's days of collecting and paying. So it's a job.
Right. What I mean by that is, though, if you don't pay, it's not that your credit goes bad. Something else happens.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. And, you know, ultimately I got involved in that type of stuff too. Okay. But, you know, you don't go in, you expect everybody's going to be honorable. They're going to pay their debts and then, you know, but I'll say this, and the jury's out. If you owe big money to a bookmaker, he's going to crack you around a lot. He's going to hurt you. I'm not going to say he's going to put you in the hospital the first time, but, you know, probably not even broken bones, probably just bruises and kicked around. If it doesn't work, it'll get a little worse and worse.
Right.
If you owe a bank money, they just come and take your house.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know what's more ruthless. You know,
yeah, you're right.
They don't really give you that many chances.
Right.
You know, so although things are changing a little over the years and that too. So no, but you're right. If they don't pay, they're going to get hurt. And if you don't do that, nobody's going to pay. So,
right.
But they were really far and few between. There weren't that many. And a lot of times we would give beatings for other reasons, which sort of brings you into thinking you're in an honorable thing. You're doing a good thing where you may have to beat a guy up that picked on somebody's daughter or robbed somebody's grandmother's purse, you know, or is doing drugs and the family can't help them. They need help. So we go and we get involved in those things too. It's not always about money.
Yeah, that was the way those neighborhoods were run. If there was, how can I say this? The criminals actually kept the crime out, if you will, right?
Well, yes, yeah, not all criminals, but our type. You know, we were criminals, right. Yes, but we were organized. Supposedly, we were a step above the street thug or the street car thief, or they all came to us they would steal cars and bring them to us. Right. They would steal radios. So we were sort of a fence for the lower level guys. We were not supposed to be involved in drugs, so we were separated from them. And nobody likes drugs for their kids or So being out of that, it kept us where everybody didn't dislike us. Right.
But what I mean is, like, for example, I was friendly with a girl who used to go to St. Joseph's College downtown, and she lived in Bensonhurst, and she used to take the train home, and this guy would follow him. She didn't know who it was, and we were kids. We were, 18, 19, and she went into one of the cafes on 18th Avenue, and she said, somebody's following me. And one of the guys go outside, and they said, oh, I know who that is. Don't worry, he won't bother you again. And he never bothered her again. And that's what I mean. Like, there was some kind of.
Absolutely. And most of the people from the neighborhood today miss us. The neighborhood's all changed. Yeah. And they changed for the worse. They're not nice. They're not good. There's no common respect,
sense of community.
So for all the good it did getting rid of us, there's there's something to be left, for us being there,
So my next question is, how did you go from somebody who was, well, actually, once you started getting involved in the rackets, how did your family view it? Were they disappointed or were they approving?
Well, they didn't really know. They didn't know.
I
I never told them the company stopped. I didn't tell them. So they saw I was living on my own. I was making a living. I had a nice car. I never had to borrow money from them.
I see.
Well, later on, I had to borrow some money when I got a little jacked up with the sports business. Everybody thinks you have to win. You don't.
Yeah,
you know, you can go through some bad times even as a book. But I learned my lesson and went on to be successful in it. But there was a rocky time there. But the point is, I was doing well. I would leave pretty early in the morning. I'd leave like 9, 10 o'clock because I'd meet Greg about 10. We'd have breakfast, and we'd go to the club together every day. And I didn't come home till sometimes 7, 8 at night, even later after the sports, after we were done in the office. So I was out. They thought I was working all day, and I didn't lie to them. I was working. Like I said, to me, it was a job. But later on, I think as they saw me closer to him and go dressing a little different things, they probably knew, but at some point it was probably too late too.
I gotcha.
You don't get it at 18 or 19. Now I'm 24.
Right.
Goes by.
Yeah. How difficult or easy was it to make the transition to becoming violent, if you will, if you needed to?
Well, I got to be honest. It's a weird and it's a peculiar situation. You're brought along slowly. In the movies they show you like your first hit, you got to kill your best friend. It's very rare that happens. I don't even know I don't know it to happen that way. Right. I've never seen it. All the guys that came in young were given small jobs. Mm-hmm. Go scope out the house. Go buy a shovel. Go, steal a car for us. We need a car. You're on the outskirts. You don't really see it. You don't know. And they're testing you. Like the first thing I had to do was give a guy a flat tire once. Mm-hmm. I gave the guy a flat. The next day in the paper, man killed fixing flat.
Oh, I see.
So I was part of it. Now, when I read the paper and I went to the club the next day, if I would have started, Greg, what happened? You didn't tell me. I was nervous. I didn't say anything about it. I made it and that's a test. So now the next time you do something a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And like I said, a lot of times the guys that are going to get hurt ultimately like that, it wasn't about money. It was about honor, respect. Somebody did something wrong to somebody's wife. So you do it thinking it's okay. It's a code. This guy went, pushed drugs on this young boy. And right. This young boy's now, so they make it where we're doing a noble thing. Okay? And that goes on for several years. Now you're 23, 24, 25. Mm-hmm. Now you're asked to sit down with him. There's a guy that is doing something. The boss wants him killed. Mm-hmm. So I drive Greg to a place. The next time I go in with him or I guard the door. Next time I'm sitting next to him. Mm-hmm. Then ultimately he's sitting next to you and you're asked to do it. Right. It's a slow process. And as it's happening, the questions get fired back at me a lot of times when I try to explain, but why didn't you leave? Why didn't you get away from it? You knew better. You start getting in deeper and deeper. You know too much. You have big business. You're relied on. There's a lot of factors mm-hmm. that come into play.
And I have to believe that life is enticing too, isn't it?
It is. Because again, you're making money. You're getting this respect. Well, I used it as I think I even said it to my sentencing judge. I said, when you, I made an analogy. I think it's in the book. When you go down to Coney Island early June, and you go down to the water, and it's still frigid. It's still very cold. You put your foot in, you turn around and walk away. Mm-hmm. I said, when you come to stick your toe into this life, it's like quicksand, okay? It's going to suck you in more and more. And not everybody, some people, walked away from it, and I give them a lot of credit. I was weak, or I was in love, or whatever the reason was. Mm-hmm. I wish I could really figure it all out. It wasn't just the money. Right. I make more money. I was always an earner. I made money as a kid. I made money in the life. I'm making money now, and not because of my book. I built businesses. I didn't ever needed the life for money.
You have that knack, yeah. So now during this time, you're still seeing Linda.
Mm-hmm.
You're earning money. You're in the life, so on and so forth. You go into the nightclub, so on, right? I'm assuming some nightlife.
Yep.
And there was a story. Actually, my brother told me this story that you had a falling out with somebody who turned out to be somebody's nephew.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. I didn't know it at the time. As a matter of fact, I didn't find out till the next night, very late at night, when I got a phone call from Greg. But it was Paul Castellano's nephew, and it was in an after-hours club. So really, we're not supposed to be in those clubs because nothing good happens at 5 a.m. You know, the regular club closes at 4.
Right.
You know, by law, and then these other places opened up at 4. So we would go straight there and continue drinking, continue our disco night or whatever it was back in the day. And yeah, it was over a girl. It wasn't, you know, it was stupid again, because if I wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened. We went outside, and at the time I was in very good shape. I was probably at the height of my martial arts, so I was able to end it fairly quick, and I didn't abuse him. I walked away once it was over. Not because I knew who he was, just there was no reason. It was over.
Right.
And the next day I got a call that, you know, when I got there, I saw who was there. I mean, there was a big black Lincoln outside, somebody in the car. Sammy was hanging out on a parking meter. And I said hello to him, and Greg came walking out of the diner.
Sammy who?
Sammy Grant, the bull.
Okay.
Sammy, yeah. He wasn't the captain or anything like that yet. Oh, he might have been a captain, but he wasn't the underboss. This was when
this was previous. Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew Sammy from the racquetball club and from the neighborhood. And when I came out, I said hello to him. I don't know who's in the car. I don't remember. Some who was driving the car. It could have been probably Frankie the Chico, because he was a neighborhood guy and very well respected and you know, really respected. He's the one that got blown up later on.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
So anyway, Greg comes out, and he's, you know, I sort of concerned him. He says, "What happened? What'd you do?" I said, "What are you talking about, Greg?" You know, he says, "You had a beef last night," and then it hit me. I says, "Yeah, but I mean, it was nothing. You had a little, you know, I mean, especially his crew. His guys were fighting all the time in clubs. I didn't know why it was so, but he held me a little above them, and he didn't want me to be doing those things, you know. So it hurt him and it bothered him. But anyway, at the moment, he says, Big Paulie's inside with Scappy. He's looking for satisfaction." I'll never forget. This was the first time I ever heard words like, "What mean satisfaction?" I don't know if he wanted to kill me, hurt me. So anyway, I go in, and obviously I can't sit at the table till I get called over. And there's a counter, so I'm waiting there. Finally, Scappy waves us over. I go over, and there's talk back and forth. And ultimately, Paul said that he wanted to hurt me. And he was still sort of angling to that. But Greg, I'll never forget it. Greg said, "If you harm a hair on his head, there'll be more bodies." He didn't even get it all out. Scappy jumped in. I said, Greg, stop.
Right.
Okay. And he had to, protocol. But he made it clear that I wasn't getting hurt. So now the rest of the conversation goes on, and it ends this way, where Paulie looks at me and says, and points to Scappy, "You owe this man your life." He said, "If he wasn't here talking for you, you'd be dead."
Okay.
Now I'm scared. I'm sorry. I'm still a kid.
Yeah, don't blame me.
I'm saying to myself, I can't get in a fight anymore because I'm a mob guy now.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know, and it's not that we got lots of fights. You know, I maybe 1 or 2 or 3 fights the whole time, you know, disco days going out. We didn't go out looking for fights.
Right.
And if I didn't go to the after hours, I wouldn't have them. But so anyway, it ended. I'm out. They told me to go. I come walking back towards my car, and Sammy, I'll never forget it, says, "You should have killed the cocksucker." So he didn't like the Castellanos. They probably already had the inklings of what they were going to do someday. Right.
You
know. So anyway.
Now, I think everybody knows who Paul Castellano is, and I mean, and Greg Scarpa. If you know anything about Mafia in Brooklyn, you know Greg Scarpa. Who is Scappy?
Scappy was Greg's captain. Now, Scappy was a long-time Colombo guy.
Uh-huh.
He sided with the Gallows during the war, the first war.
Oh,
or the
really?
second war, one of the older wars. And Greg was on Profaci's side with Persico. After the war, after that war ended, Scappy came back, and he was with Junior now. He was with Junior, and Junior made him a captain. I don't know all the details. I would imagine he had to make some guys that were around Gallo feel that they the trust. You're back in the family. Anyway, not that he didn't deserve it. Scappy was a gangster all the way, and he was the captain. The first person I knew was a captain above Greg.
Did he have the same reputation as Greg, or he was not as fierce?
I don't think so, but he was well respected. He was well respected. He went back a long time. Like I said, he was a gangster all the way. And, him and Greg were tight. As a matter of fact, if you fast forward a little bit, when he had to go away to prison for a long stretch, actually while he was just, not even convicted yet, whether he was out on bail or not, I don't really remember the details, but he made Greg Jr. his acting captain.
Scappy did.
Yeah, he didn't even go to Greg. And I didn't know that. I always thought, Greg told me he turned it down. Okay? But I find out many years later, just recently from Greg Jr., who I'm speaking with again. I mean, I spoke to him for years while he was away. We stayed close. But he's home now. He told me no. They bypassed my father.
Ah, okay.
Now, in hindsight,
yeah,
knowing that they knew about him, it makes sense.
Right.
Well, so why would you bypass the father?
Yeah, they knew. They were just turning a blind eye. Yeah.
Right.
So now this whole time you're still seeing Linda, and you're working for Greg. And does Greg know that you're still seeing Linda?
Well, what happened was after quite a bit of time, maybe a year and a half of this big secret, I was getting now closer to him. The other business, the legitimate business was gone. He's introduced me to people like Scappy, other captains. I'm driving him places, and he's introducing me as his nephew. And I look on everybody's faces, like the respect. I mean, it was ridiculous.
I can imagine.
I started feeling really guilty more and more. And I was telling Linda this. I says, we can't. I mean, this isn't right anymore. I mean, I got to move on. She wouldn't hear of it. So she kept telling me she was going to tell him about us. So I was getting paranoid. I didn't know when she was going to tell him, if she really was. Finally, she must have told him, because on the way to the club one day, he starts opening up to me, telling me how I'm, mature for my age. He trusts me, and I think you could handle this. I knew where he was going. And I always said to myself I would never admit it. But when we get to the club, we walk in, we get to our position. He sits behind his desk in a big seat, and I took the seat behind on the other side of the desk. And he's continuing. There's nobody else in there now but us two. And he says, he comes out and he says, I know about you and Linda. Oh. So, yeah, my whole stomach was turning, and I'm saying, I don't know what triggered in my mind, but saying I would never admit it, I remember, and I've said this story so many times, but my exact words were, Greg, I have a lot of respect for you, and you're far from an idiot. But only an idiot wouldn't see it. So I let him know that I knew he knew, right? To some extent. And he busted out laughing. He had a great sense of humor. He liked to laugh. We walked outside, and he told me, and this is the first time I got this rule really direct, was that it has to remain a secret between the three of us, or him and I will be killed. Wow. So now imagine a 21-year-old kid, if that old, maybe 20, hearing this, but now that little three-way secret and that common ground I had with him made us closer than ever. And he went on years later to tell me I was his closest and best friend he ever had in the life.
Wow, really?
Nobody never trusted anybody like me. That's a big thing, for us to have. And he eventually he told me too that he had another wife who was Greg Jr.'s mom out in Jersey. They were still married. And he had another wife in Vegas. So he had three wives. And later on, after all this, coming home from jail, talking from family members and stuff, there's a fourth one out there.
Oh my God.
But three I knew of that he was juggling throughout his life, different levels of juggling, whatever it was.
Right.
So I sometimes wonder if he accepted it because I made his life easier.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Linda was 20 years younger than him.
Okay.
So he's 50, she's 30, I'm 20.
Okay.
You know, well, 19.
So there's a that's amazing. That because you would never think you would never think something like that would be acceptable by a man like that. But right. I guess he had his own reasons, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a story about Greg Scarpa, the Mississippi burning story. Mm-hmm. Can you get into that a little? And then I want to kind of.
Yeah, but really, all I know about that really is what came out in court papers and the newspapers when it came. When it all came out that Greg was a top echelon informer.
Okay.
But he, what I know from that and from little bits and pieces from Linda over the years, that he went down. He was asked by the FBI to help them find the bodies of the civil service workers that were missing. None of the, I guess it was a Ku Klux Klan, none of them would give it up. So he went down and he worked his way to the main guy that knew. Mm-hmm. A lot of it comes out in the first part that he just went right to this guy in a appliance store, but he had to work his way, and he threatened some people. And one of the agents had said to me that he did unspeakable things to them. So he, use your imagination.
Yeah.
And
right,
then somebody else said he put a knife and he cut them and stuff in bad spots.
Yeah.
So, again, I wasn't there. He never gave me the details, but little bits and pieces. He went and he did some bad things to people to get to the guy that knew where the bodies were. Okay. And ultimately he got the bodies, and that story that came out where he went to the store and he threw them in the trunk, that actually did happen. I mean, it seems to be a fact. And he got the bodies for them, and ever since that moment, he had total carte blanche with the FBI.
Oh, I see. Okay. One more question, and then I want to get back to you, and then leading into the war. The Mary Bari. This was a sensitive situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was. We came back to him, to Greg. Whether it was from his FBI agent partner or from just maybe Ali Persico, who was the boyfriend of this girl, that she was cooperating with the FBI. Okay, so to help assist in catching him, he was on the lam, and she didn't want to live that life anymore, so she left him. She knew where he was. She knew everything about him. So whether it was actual tapes that the FBI heard and it got back through Greg, or they just surmised that she would become, an informant.
Okay.
So there was a hit on her. He ordered a hit. Mm-hmm. And I remember when it was being spoken about, and eventually, obviously it happened. It's all public knowledge now. But I remember Greg telling me that he didn't bring some of us in because we didn't have the stomachs for it. Mm. So, some of the guys that he was grooming and had done a lot of work up to that point were left out. There was only a few guys in that room that night.
I see. And you weren't one of them? No. Okay.
I mean, listen, I'm glad I wasn't. But,
yeah, I don't blame you.
if he had told me to come, I had to be there, I would have been there.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he knew my stomach wasn't a lot less than what he can handle.
Yeah, and basically murdering a woman was.
But what Scrappy said afterwards, the next day when he came to the club, he said, "We're all going to hell for this one."
Oh, yeah.
We're all going to hell, but yet it was done, even though they knew.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a rough one.
It's tough. That's not a nice one. That's a bad story. Yeah.
So, all right. So now, and I remember this. I remember I was a kid. I was like, middle school or something like that. This war breaks out between two factions of. Well, growing up, I never called it the Colombos. Everybody called it the Persicos.
Well, it was the Persicos,
Yeah.
but I think there's some legal thing with the government or the FBI. I don't think they could call it the Persico family until Persico's dead. Now it may become the there's something to that. I don't know. I'm not a historian. I don't know the exact rules or laws, but why was it the Colombo family?
Yeah,
You
I
know,
have no idea. Yeah, because
yeah. I mean,
in the neighborhood and everybody, like, they called it Persico. Everybody knew Junior.
Right.
Well, everybody knew who he was, and so on and so forth. So this war breaks out.
Right.
So, okay, why don't you explain a little bit?
Well, there was a lot of people don't know there was a bit of a Cold War before.
Okay.
Because when he put Vic Arena in that position, there were a lot of people that thought Junior should have stepped down. He had 133 years, and he shouldn't try to hold control of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can have that opinion, and it's not a bad opinion to have. Doesn't have its valid points. But the rule is what it is. He's the boss until he steps down or gets voted out unanimously.
Okay.
He didn't step down, and it's impossible for a boss to get voted out unanimously. Because as soon as he becomes the boss, he makes his brother the consigliere. He makes his 4 nephews captains. He makes his best friend the underboss, and then he makes 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 other captains to make the rest of the people happy.
Okay.
So it's set up in a way that it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So those captains that are going to side with him have to be inferior lives or feel that's it, that they'll be taken out if they don't.
Okay.
And that's what causes a split. So he was making these moves, Vic Arena, who was named acting boss, to strengthen his side.
Mm-hmm.
For when he made this move, he had people that didn't like Junior for reasons, whether they owed him a lot of money, whether they were held back from moving up. They were soldiers for 20 years. They never became captains. There was always there was reasons he was putting these people around him. There was a couple of murders that took place that were written off as something else, but they were guys that would not ever come in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ultimately, he decides he's got the power now, and he puts a declaration out that he's taking over the family. He had John Gotti in his ear, like he would help. And John had his motives. He didn't like Junior from some disrespectful thing that Junior did to him in jail years ago before he was even a good fella.
Really?
Yeah, he wouldn't let him sit at the table. So he didn't like that. Plus, John had a very big ego, and he wanted to be like Carlo, the boss of all bosses.
I gotcha.
And while Junior was alive and the Chin was alive, that's never going to happen because neither one of those two guys respected him that much, especially the way he took over the family.
Right.
Other families like Gas Pipes Crew and they did their own takeovers and stuff, so they were more of the new breed.
Okay.
But these old school guys were not going to respect John as even the boss. They wanted to take him out. So he knew he had John on his side.
I see. Okay.
So he made this formal approach, okay, and told all the captains. He had the consigliere, who was Jimmy Angelina, go to all the captains. It was said, poll the captains and see if they'll all come over to our side. So Jimmy goes out, and he asks, and I was right there when he asked Greg. And Greg made sure I stood there. It was funny because I was walking away. I had no right listening to this conversation.
I see. Okay.
When Jimmy sent for Greg to see Greg, I took Greg to the club. And I was going to walk away. He said, no, you stay here. Is it all right, Jimmy? And Jimmy said, yep. So he asked him, whose side? He said, Vic wants to take the spot officially. He wants to know where you stand if he does that. So Greg had just gotten out of the hospital. He was very, very sick. He lost a ton of weight. And I remember him saying he's semi-retired. Wherever the chips fall, I'll fall in line.
I see.
So we leave. As soon as I got in the car, I asked Greg, why did you declare yourself? I know Greg too well now. You know, I'm with him 7 or 8 years. And he says, Larry, if I would have said I'm on Vic's side, and it gets back to Junior, I'm dead.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell them right here and now, I'm staying with Junior, that's my boss, and Jimmy goes back and tells Vic, Vic's got to take him out.
I see.
Vic's got to take out Greg. So either way, he's a dead man. So he just stayed neutral.
Right.
And here's a guy that I thought was losing his mind from being sick, and maybe in 5 minutes he digested all this. So now, within 2 weeks, Jimmy Angelina disappears.
Oh, okay.
So Vic sends a message to Junior that Jimmy was trying to take over the family. He was going to the captains.
Really?
So he made it like he was going to the captains behind Vic's back.
Oh.
This is the treachery. This is the treachery that's going on. So now Jimmy gets killed, and he elevates Carmine Sessa. Now, Carmine Sessa, anybody that comes from Greg's crew is good fellow material.
Okay.
They're going to get straightened out, okay? Even captains, I'll give you that. A consigliere his number one job is to save lives. Okay, it's supposed to be a guy that all the men trust. They can go talk to. If he calls you in the middle of the night, you just come. You're not going to get clipped. Mm-hmm. Carmine didn't have any of those attributes. Nothing. He had no right being a consigliere. But in hindsight, he was disposable to Vic. He'd use him because he was close to Greg. He told Carmine to do the same thing. Go see if Greg will come with us. Okay. And the captains and the Russos and whoever. So Carmine comes to Greg, and right there at the house. Greg starts laughing. He says, he's going to do the same thing to you he did to Jimmy if you don't get this done. So now Carmine gets paranoid, figuring he's next to go.
Right.
So he goes and he makes a feeble attempt on Vic. If he really wanted Vic dead, he should have told Greg at that meeting right there and then, well, then we have to take Vic out. And if he had Greg in his corner, Vic would be dead today. There would have been no war. But all these little stupid moves along the way fed the fire, so to speak. So he went with a half-cocked crew, and when Vic saw them, they ran away. So he saw you. What, did you have to sneak up behind him and put a mask on him? You got him in the car across the street, pull up, shoot, So they came back, and now there was a split, an official split, and so lots of things happened. There were talks. There was who's hiding out, who ran away. They made us look like the rebels. Meanwhile, they were the rebels. Ultimately, it erupted in a shooting war, as everybody knows. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that happened in between. Lots of meetings, lots of, funeral parlor meetings because guys died just naturally, and both sides came to pay their respect.
Right.
And Greg played the middle as long as he could.
I see. And then, if you don't mind me asking, how many murders did you take part in during this war?
Well, there was Nikki, Vinny, Larry Lampese, 3, plus a lot of shootouts and injuries both ways. But I know there was 4 we did. This is like weird that I can't even remember them all. I don't mean it like that. I don't mean like that. But we got Nikki, we got Vinny Venus. Larry Lampese was the last one. I may be missing one in there.
Now, is this like The Godfather, where you actually go to the mattresses, you're not at home anymore, you're actually hiding out?
Yeah, a lot of guys did. We were actually we were looking for apartments and things like that around the city to be in. But I went out and stayed. I had family in Jersey.
Okay.
So me and Jimmy went out there and stayed. Greg stayed home. He refused to leave. Later on, he went out to Jersey to his farm in Lakewood a lot, and we would coordinate from there. We would meet, drive back into Brooklyn, drive around looking for our enemies, and then go back to Jersey. So it was a lot like that. But most of the guys
steal, huh?
He did.
Yeah,
most of the guys made themselves scarce.
I see.
They were hiding upstate New York, Jersey. One went to Italy, one went to Vegas. So what happens is there's some warriors that are out there every day. Like you see the movie Braveheart, there's a couple of crews that they just keep going. Right. And that was us. And the other side was Wild Bill's crew, Billy Catoli. Yeah. And
I was going to get to Wild Bill because as he was a big name in the neighborhood when I was growing up. And you hear much about Vic, but you don't hear much about Wild Bill much.
Well, Billy moved up quick.
Okay.
When I was around, Billy wasn't even a good fellow at first.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was, but he was certainly up and coming.
Mm-hmm.
And he got straightened out in I want to say maybe 83, 84. That's not too far before the war started.
Okay.
And by 86, he was the underboss. Vic made him underboss.
Really?
But then that changed. For some reason, he put him back to captain and brought in not Benny Alloy. Then Benny Alloy went to prison, and he brought in Joe Scopo just as the war was starting. So there was musical chairs for the underboss spot. And I think it was because Billy was very, what's the word? He's very out there. He doesn't pull up with one car like Greg did and one guy in the car. When Billy pulled up to a place, 4 cars pulled up. It was like the president getting out.
Yeah.
He was starting to make a lot of money. I guess he was starting to be concerned about, maybe somebody trying to take what was his.
Mm-hmm.
But he built up a good crew around him, had a lot of respect. And he had our respect during the war because we knew his crew was our main concern. And another one was, I'll just use his first name, Joe. He just got home, so I'm not going to bring up his name.
Okay.
But he was also somebody that Greg really wanted. And we had several shootouts with him. We actually hurt him real bad on one. He was lucky that there was an ambulance right around the block taking a coffee break.
Oh, wow.
And, so they had blood. They were able to transfusion right away and get him to a hospital because there was like 4 or 5 bullets in him.
I'm not going to ask you about all the killings, but there was one specific that I wanted to ask you about, and if you could go into detail, because I did hear it from another interview you did, and that was Nikki Black.
Yeah. Well, that was probably the biggest hit in the Colombo War. Now, there was another one that came later when they got Joe Scopo, but the war was pretty much over. That was more payback. And they were trying to negotiate and put the family back together, but some guys were never going to be able to get a pass, and he was one of them. But anyway, up to the point, none of the higher ranking guys or real big names were getting hit. So anyway, this Nikki Black, he was a heavyweight, been around a long time, big earner, and my Uncle Albert was on there on Avenue U.
I see. Okay.
And he told my Uncle Albert that my nickname was Butchie. Mm-hmm. If your nephew Butchie don't come over to our side, I'm going to kill him. Mm-hmm. So this is my mother's brother. Somebody else in the club also heard it and told Carmine Sessa that he was targeting me. So he became our number 1 target now. And within a day or two, it might have been the next day or 2 days later, we're driving around and we spotted him. But before that, I went to see my Uncle Albert that night when I heard it from Carmine. And he told me, yeah. He said, I want you to be careful. And he looked at me and he said, don't you forget, blood is sticking in water. In other words, I had nothing to worry about with him. If he knew anything, he'd tell me. And I knew that already. I mean, this is my godfather. We were both on thin ice having this conversation. Lucky enough, again, in context of life, we find Nikki Black, and he was pulling up in front of his car service that he had a piece of or owned. And we were actually looking at another club because we saw somebody's car outside, Funzy D. Mm-hmm. And I spotted him pull up. I had the binoculars about a half a block away. I could see everybody walking in and out. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So I got allergies. And being in Florida, and I jog every day and stuff, I breathe it in and it kills me. So anyway, yeah, Nikki, we spotted him. As we pull up, he takes off. He starts driving away. Not that he was fleeing, but he starts driving around the block. Jimmy's following him close. He pulls up to another house, and this guy, Anthony, comes out, and he hands him an envelope. But just as he's doing that, we pull up alongside Nikki. Now, we had a fake siren in the window, coffee cups, baseball hats. We were sort of looking, we wanted to look like we were law doing surveillance.
I see.
And I believe he had to think that was the case because when we pulled up, he never turned. And in a war, you don't let a car pull up alongside you.
Yeah, right.
And we were looking in windows, in mirrors, had guns in our hands in the car, bulletproof vests on, never would we not let a car roll up on us. We always left space in front of us. So anyway, I think he was sitting in the car and he probably looked over at his nephew and said, "They're rolling up. The law's coming." Something it had to be.
Yeah.
He
Right.
never turned. So Greg had a rifle, and he was trying to turn, and at the same time he was hitting the clip. And instead of hitting the safety, he hit the ammunition clip. So all the bullets started falling out.
Wow.
I had a shotgun.
Mm.
Okay, that was what I used. And I leaned out the window. I got within inches of the back of his head. He never turned around, and I blasted him.
Wow.
And yeah, it sent shockwaves through the Vic Arenas side because he was next in line for consigliere.
Wow.
In Vic Arenas' eyes. And to me, driving away, I never, the pre-war things I was involved with, I'll never forgive myself for.
Okay.
During the war, it was kill or be killed.
I got you.
This one was, I drove away almost feeling satisfied that this guy threatened that he was going to come and get me. Mm-hmm. I got him first.
Right.
It's survival. And it's funny, the guy that wrote the theme song to my book, you should listen to it. It's called The Life. You can see it on YouTube or my website if you haven't heard the song yet. One of the lines is, sometimes you have to be the one who kills.
I got you. Okay.
And listen to that. The guy that wrote the song, Carlos Carr, is a phenomenal talent. He sings like Sinatra. Okay. He wrote the song.
Okay.
But he caught it. He caught the story in a little 4 minutes. But it's a great song. If you like Sinatra, you'll love the song.
All right, I'll check it out.
So that is probably the only one that, if he would have kept his mouth shut and didn't send that message, maybe we wouldn't have been sitting there so long waiting for him.
Right.
Or looking for him. We might have just kept driving around and randomly got somebody. But if there's a God in the sky and he lines things the way he does or whatever, he should have kept his mouth shut. I didn't go threatening anybody.
Right. Now, during this whole time, did you also have the FBI coming down on you and police and so on and so forth?
Yeah. As it went on, more and more, yes, there was more surveillance. But, we had a scammer, okay? And the FBI and the task force had a secret code, like a 5-digit code. It could have been any 5 numbers. We had the code.
Oh.
I don't have to tell you how we got that.
Right.
Obviously, in hindsight. So now we were listening to them as they're following us, as they're following Wild Bill. We were actually sitting in front of a restaurant one night, me and Jimmy, listening to the scanner, as Billy had a big meeting with his guys in an Italian restaurant. Guys walking in and out. There's a van with FBI right in front of the restaurant. The guys are going up fixing their hair in the window of the van before they go in. And we're listening to this. We're listening to their feds laugh at them. Look, they don't even know we're in here,
That's
stuff that you can't make up.
Yeah.
And then eventually about 6 or 8 backups come. They go in and they pinch them all because it was getting that. They figured they'd catch them with guns and stuff. So anyway, so we were able to stay a step ahead of them because we had the scanner. But yeah, the surveillance was getting rough. Hines, who was the Brooklyn DA, was getting upset that some innocent people got. And he said, arrest them on site. Arrest them for something. Find a gun, conspiracy. So yeah.
So all right, that's an amazing. That's something you see in a movie. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So Billy disappears, correct?
Well, now that's later on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in prison now.
Yeah.
And way later on. But it's funny because I was told by Greg, the 3 people that will never get a pass are Vic, 4 people. Joe Scarpa.
Okay.
Billy, because the second time he went against the family. And Vinny Alloy. Same thing with him. He went against the family, and he was a catalyst because he's a longtime member, very political. And he told me those 4 guys will never get a pass. Billy wound up getting killed.
Okay.
Joe Scopo got killed. Vic got life, or he would have been killed. And Vinny Alloy, the last I heard, he left New York for the sunny state, and he's retired. Yeah, he's much older now too. So.
So I'm not going to keep you much longer because, I mean, like you said, we could talk about this,
We could do a part 2.
Yeah.
If you want to get into, and I appreciate that because my throat is starting to hurt a little bit.
No problem.
No, and I'll be more than happy to do it. We can continue with what you probably want to talk a little bit about prison, a little bit about me making a deal, how that all came about, and that's understandable. So if you want to, yeah.
Do you before we go, definitely that would be great if we do a part 2.
Yeah.
But before you go, what do you think? I mean, I'm sure you don't keep in touch or whatnot, but what do you think of the Mafia now, the Italian Mafia?
The truth is, I'm in touch with a lot of guys that make deals. And I use that term because there's different ways of making a deal, okay, with the government. There's different ways, there's different reasons, and we'll talk about all that. And there's a lot of guys that are active but retired.
I see.
That I talk to. When I was away in prison the last 2 years, I was with one of the bosses of one of the families that loved me. And I had to tell him I didn't go out like a hero. And he still continued to be tight with me.
Okay.
He likes me a lot. Okay. And I'll tell more about that story on part 2.
Okay.
But I'll never tell who it is because he's still active.
I understand.
So there are guys that have still consider me a friend, respect me, understand the decision I made. And there's a lot of guys that got help because of that decision. So really, basically, it was the corruption that saved me, and exposing that didn't hurt anybody, But I did break a rule. I had to sit in the stand. I had to talk to these people. So I'm not trying to say I didn't break a rule, but you take that with a grain of salt. I wouldn't want to be in it today because the whole character, the whole the level of people I came in under, and what I see out there now, the people I hear are running things or in charge, or I couldn't wear shorts to the club. Now they're wearing hoodies. They don't carry themselves the same way. Guys I know that had drug problems, that couldn't run a racket business other than selling drugs, are now in positions. So it's been diluted.
Yeah.
Most of the families have been diluted. It'll probably never be the same.
I understand violence is frowned upon now because it brings heat.
I heard killing is.
Yeah.
I don't know about total violence, but killing, and that's a smart move. It's a smart move. I've always said, just beat the guy up. If he did something really big, just keep beating him up every time he's spotted. Eventually, he'll just leave. He's not going to want to get beat up every week. And he'll leave, and he'll be out of your life the same way. Killing him, somebody's not going to want to do life. Somebody's going to want to get revenge. You're opening a whole can of worms.
Right.
So, that, and they should have stayed away from the drugs.
Yeah. I think
because now, like I said before, the normal person, like my father, that didn't hate the mob guys. He knew they had a service in the neighborhood. He knew he could go to my Uncle Albert when he had a problem.
Yes.
But if he knew my Uncle Albert was part of drugs that were getting to kids and things, now you're just not, you lost that credibility of being above the common criminal.
Yes.
So I agree with that. Those two things, the killing and the drugs, became too easy.
Okay. Sir, I'm going to let you go because, like you said, we could talk about this all night. There's so many questions and names and so on and so forth. But, we could do a part 2. But I really appreciate you doing this. You have no idea. This is like the height of my very short YouTube career.
Well, it's a good start. I mean, for you did a great job is what I meant to say. And let me know when I can see it.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think it's live. You're probably going to edit it, I would think.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I will definitely send you a link.
Shoot me a text or whatever. Or
absolutely, sir.
So I can watch it.
Thank you.
We'll set up a part 2.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
All right,
and, we'll keep in touch.
For sure. All right. Thank you.
Good night.